Disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in this video are those of my own and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any other person or group of people. They do not purport to reflect the opinions or views of any group of people, person, or fanbase or its members. This video and the presentation of material therein do not imply the expression of any opinion other than mine.
Warning: the following video contains explicit language which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Hello and welcome to this video. Today we are going to be listening to some more Rabbits Podcast, episode 4, season 1, Doglover in Hell, part 2. So without any further ado, let's get into it.
Great. The magician had a space in the back of an old brick building in the Capitol Hill area. It was part dive bar, part old video arcade. I'd actually been here before, to play video games. This place is a popular hipster bar on the weekends, lineups around the block. They have some of my favorite games, although most of them aren't working half the time. As we walked through the bar, I noticed two of the games that were working at the moment: Robotron 2084 and Missile Command. Even now, in this situation, I wanted to stop and play. What can I say? I love arcade games.
Video game junkie, gonna be a video game junkie. It's just it. My wife plays lots of video games, and I understand the want, because I am a fairly avid Minecraft addict, so the whole seeing a video game, wanting to play a video game is very understandable, especially I think for Gen Xers it is, simply because we left the house at dawn and didn't come back to daylight, and video arcades were there, and if we had any little pocket change or what have you, we played video games. So yeah, I imagine that call to video games, especially arcade style video games, is probably a really big Gen X thing. My wife is considerably younger than I am, and her thing is computer games, but a video game addict, not a video game addict. That's just, the way it is.
Jones led us through the arcade proper to a back room. He knocked 3 times on the door. It opened, seemingly on its own, and revealed a large rec room-style wood-paneled room with more video games and 2 pinball machines, Pinbot and Centaur. A young woman in aviator goggles stood on the other side of the door.
Now, see, that was my thing growing up. A real good friend of mine, who I'm still friends with, that I grew up with, growing up, he was a lot better at video games than I was. Still is, probably to this day, because, well, I suck at video games, but I like me some pinball.
Door. Her name was Scarlett. She was about 4'9" with a cute button nose and green hair. Tangerine dreamy synth music played through an early generation iPod. There was an extremely tall, thin man in a light blue suede jacket, hunched over a console against the back wall. He was playing Space Ace, a Don Bluth animated game from the 80s.
Now I can say, with all honesty, Space Ace was one of those games that my suckage at playing the game went above and beyond normal suckage. Well, my childhood friend Gary, after about the third time he played it, just boom, just blew through it. This is where I got my thing for a really good graphic video game. Watching somebody who's good at playing a video game, this is where my fascination in watching people play video games came in. But this is, Space Ace and its companion game, Dragon Slayer, were both really cool games.
I was more into Dragon Slayer, but I'd played them both. My brother had a Laserdisc Special Edition. I'd never seen an actual Dragon Slayer or Space Ace stand-up cabinet until this moment. It was cool. There were a few other games there as well. Asteroids, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which was another game I'd never seen before, and Tron. I loved Tron. We sat there for 5 minutes or so as the magician finished his game. Scarlett handed me a signed release form. I pressed record, and the magician turned to face me. His eyes were sunken and coal black, his teeth the color of yellow muck. But he had a shine about him, a way of almost sparkling as he talked. And he talked a lot.
We need to know what's going on with the game.
You need.
Please.
And what do you need, my dear?
What he said.
What do you know about chaos theory?
Okay, hello, my name is Carly Parker. I'm looking for my friend, Yumiko. She's gone missing.
He knows your name, and he knows about Yumiko.
Should I just call you Mr. the Magician?
What do you know about strange attractors?
And I think this is where the character of the magician kind of just endears himself to me. He's one of those supporting characters that is crucial to the story, but you really, there's a sense of mystery around him, sense of awe.
Not much.
Okay. An attractor is a set of numerical values toward which a system tends to evolve. An attractor is considered strange if it results in a fractal.
Great.
A strange attractor represents the parameter space of a chaotic system, so each output of the equation becomes a parameter for the next step or iteration. There are things, movements, flow, what the Chinese call qi.
Okay.
I used to design games for a living.
See, this whole chi thing and flow thing, I think it's, everyone has their own thing. It's like me. I am drawn to the numbers 3 and 5 for some reason. Just don't know. Those two numbers I just like in combination with each other. Either something that adds up to 5, including the number 3, or 3 plus 5, or it's just 8, or 3 times 5 is 15, or 2 plus 3 is 5. Though I am then again, I'm also fascinated by your single-digit prime numbers because there's so many of them. So I think everything has its own ebb and flow, its own chi, for lack of a better term. It's just kind of interesting how it's framed in this particular podcast.
I worked at Atari for a few years, Activision after that.
The magician was involved in 4.
Let me tell it, Jones.
Is there any way to speed this up?
While working at Atari, I began noticing certain things, patterns. In 1976, just before they sold Atari to Warner's, I found the rabbit hole. It was the game, Tank, which would eventually become the cartridge that was released as Combat.
Yeah, I remember Combat. My brother had that game. There wasn't much to it.
The rabbit hole remained there, in the commercial version as well. It was what we now refer to as an Easter egg. Programmers like Owen Rubin, known for including their initials as Easter eggs, were suspected, but they all denied any involvement in the frag system doorway.
What's that?
The doorway to 4. It was a virtual clue into a real-world game. There had been whispers of rabbits behind the scenes, but the last game had ended in 1970.
3.
That's right. 3. But 4 was special. I remember my first following.
See, that's another thing I enjoy, that each iteration of the game sets the groundwork for the next iteration. It's kind of interesting. It comes into play when you get into the novel, how the iterations built on each other, throughout, time, and it's just a really cool way of doing it. It just adds to the lore and the immersion, makes you want to go back and explore the older games of rabbits.
I went to one of the real-world entry points and followed the instructions.
What instructions?
I don't remember exactly, but it involved getting on the BART train, sitting beside the first man in a hat you saw, getting off when he did, and waiting at the station for a sign.
Sounds complicated.
It's not easy to influence the undercurrents of the world.
No, I suppose not.
I continued. I followed a man to a building, found numbers hidden in graffiti that turned out to be longitude and latitude. I went there and found instructions to listen to a specific radio station at a specific time, and eventually I got lost.
Which is kind of cool. I've sometimes wondered, in the city I live in, or live near, I live out in the country, but the city I live near has a couple really fantastic historical based murals. But if you go and you look at the details, what the author, that the painter came up with, there's just little things in there that make you go, aha. Then you have painters and stuff that do that all over the world, and you start getting these unconnected anomalies and stuff in paintings where just by sheer numbers they're going to overlap, and it's just a probabilities and statistics thing. Then you come back, like the talented writers for this podcast, you take these oddities and you form a story. It's just really cool on how they do that.
It took me 3 months to find my way back in. Threw a card in the back of a book in a library in Oakland, California. A few weeks later, it was over. 5 started up sometime in 1979, but I was burned out, so I began studying rather than playing the game.
The magician is an expert in everything related to rabbits.
So you know who's playing and what's happening.
See, I find, Jones refers to the magician as an expert. But can someone really be an expert at something like rabbits that's always evolving and changing? But it is what it is.
It's not that simple, I'm afraid. Nobody knows everything, at least not at any one time. But I can usually tell you when each game started, give or take a day or a month, or in one case a year. And I can normally tell you where it began within a marker or two. I make it my business to be aware of as many participant code names as possible, along with the most solid rumors and clues to recent markers.
Is knowing all of these details helpful?
It can be extremely helpful. I am the first place prospective players come to find out if a game is starting, how long it's been running, if there are serious complications.
Complications like what?
Like patterns in motion, convergence approaching, inflection points ignored or misjudged.
Yeah, now I think it might be getting a little complicated.
Can we get back to now? Back to 9?
In quantum mechanics, observation can often change the reality, the state of a photon or an electron. Does it behave like a particle or a wave? Well, that might depend on whether we're looking at it or not, whether we're thinking about it or not, whether hundreds of people are thinking about it or not.
Now this gets into some territory that I have a very sophomoric grasp on. I mean, to fully grasp it, I don't have enough working brain cells to wrap around it. But it's one of those things that you can get the gist of when you start talking waveforms, particles, quantum mechanics, string theory. It gets kind of wild. It gets kind of crazy. Then you turn around as somebody who's a storyteller, not me, but person telling this particular story in this podcast, to put it at a level where most people that are going to be attracted to a podcast like Rabbits can grasp and wrap their head meat around it. It's pretty. That in itself takes skill, in my opinion.
Like that book, The Secret.
Manifest energy thought. If you think it, you can make it happen.
Okay, Oprah, get to the point.
As you know, the iteration of Rabbits known as 8 ended in 2007.
Yes.
Since 1959, the beginning of the modern era of Rabbits, there's never been more than a 4 or 5 year gap between games.
Okay.
It's been almost 10 years. Most people believe Rabbits has been sleeping, waiting as it was before 1959. Until last year, I was one of those believers.
What happened last year?
The first stirring, hints and chatter in the deep web, strange alternate reality games, weird psychological events, missing time, missing people, missing time. The usual.
That's the usual?
My best.
Now the whole missing time thing is something that intrigues me. Because we've all had it happen. You'd be doing something, whether it be at your computer, reading a book or something, and your brain conceptualizes, 10, 15, 20 minutes gone by, but reality is 2.5, 3 hours have gone by. I've done that playing Minecraft. Go in and go, okay, I'm going to do this little project. It should take, 30, 40 minutes. Next thing I know, this little project's this grand build, and it's 3.5 hours later. And you just have no idea where the time went. And I also known from my younger days of getting elevated that happens too. You have these time dilations. It's just kind of cool.
My guess is that 9 began running in early 2016. I've never had this much trouble pinning the start date down. Something is different now, something that changed near the end of 8.
How many are playing 9?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
No. This is where things get interesting.
How so?
The game changed.
The game changed?
At some point near the end of 8, it became more aggressive, harder to follow. It had become far less forgiving, and there were significantly more losses.
Which is interesting because it's like the game itself has gone kind of evolved for more secrecy, or that's what it seems like. Also, you're going to hear droning in the background. It's 103 degrees outside, and the air conditioner is playing hell to keep up. So I got a fan going. So that's that droning noise you hear in the background. It's just hot. But let's get back into it.
Losses. Like deaths.
Deaths, yes, but there are other kinds of losses as well. Losing property, time, your mind.
Sure where my microphone should be.
People disappearing all over the world after watching strange videos and other things.
Yes. Of course, with rabbits, these types of events, these physical dangers are always present. That's the price of admission. But nothing like this since the end of 8. I don't know, it's as if the game has mutated or changed to fit the times, maybe.
Is it possible to see wardens involved this early?
Nobody's seen a warden since 3, maybe 6, but certainly not since then.
Right.
If you're seeing wardens, especially this early, something's wrong. Something is very wrong. You need to be careful, Jones.
Maybe you're off with the start date. Maybe 9 started earlier. Maybe the year before.
That's impossible. There's no way that I am that far off.
You're sure?
I'm sure.
I love the confidence that the wizard has in his own research. It tells you that he's been doing this for a minute. And if something weird is happening, he will eventually get to the bottom of it.
9 just started very recently. 8 was forfeited in 2007.
By Hazel.
That's right. There was no winner of 8. That was the end. Until now. Do you believe you've seen wardens? It's important.
Maybe. I don't know.
See, the conclusion, or not really conclusion, the theory, it's not even really a theory, it's more of a hypothesis that I have about the rabbits game is that it's like a membrane, like across the snare drum. And it has an expected, rhythm, hitting and vibration and stuff. Then the 8th iteration came around, and because it was forfeited, it gave the wrong vibration through the membrane of the game, and the game had to reform and reshape itself to account for that, because that had never happened before.
Things are different this time. If you really want to know what's happening with 9, you need to look into what happened with 8.
What do you mean?
That's when things changed. If you want to find out what happened to your friend, you should start by looking at what happened to Hazel.
Hazel. What about Hazel?
Hazel was the best of them. For some reason, Hazel just stopped.
Stopped what?
Playing the game.
And you think that's when things changed somehow with rabbits?
This Hazel may or may not have, and it's kind of ambiguous even through the second season stuff, that, and even in the novel, that Hazel, by forfeiting the game, may have strengthened the game, may have made it trickier, harder, more challenging, or it could have been the advent of the internet, file transfers, sharing data, and what have you, or a combination of the two, and which makes the more you overwork something, the easier it is to cause a problem. The more you overwork the plumbing, the more chances you're going to have of a leak. And I think this is kind of what's happening in the 9th iteration of Rabbits.
Something happened. Yes.
I haven't been able to find much of anything about Hazel. Only that he or she was about to win the game known as 8 before, as you say, something happened.
Hazel found something and just disappeared. Something happened to Hazel, something important. And now the game is different.
We should get going.
He's right.
Is there someplace I can go to find out more about Hazel? Or the 8th version of Rabbits?
The place 8 began is here. Literally. In this room.
Where?
The game.
What, Rabbits?
The game I was playing when you entered.
Space Ace.
Yes.
Okay, can you elaborate?
It was 1994. 3 years since 7 had ended. Dawn Blue's game was one of the first indicators that 8 had begun.
What do you mean?
I mean, the circle just appeared out of nowhere, replacing the traditional high score list on this machine, which was in an arcade in South Carolina at the time.
This machine?
This exact machine.
So the regular high score list was replaced by a list of players.
A list of winners.
Of rabbits.
Yes. At that time, the circle only included 1 through 7. When this list appeared on this machine, it included the number 8 with a blank space where the winner's name was to eventually be filled in.
So players knew that the 8th iteration of Rabbits had begun.
That is one of the ways they knew. The thing is I wonder if somebody has or can, or even if can be done to go in and modify get a version of Space Ace and modify it to throw the rabbits stuff into it. I think that would be interesting. I think that would be cool. I would pay money to have a game like that, you know, even though it would be more or less merchandise for the podcast, but it's just kind of cool. Just one of those things I would like to see.
Yes.
I stepped over to the Space Ace cabinet. The name of the game was stenciled in red on the side of the cabinet in billowing smoke. There was a high score screen, which made perfect sense, of course. Pretty much all video games had a screen where the players' high scores were listed. But this high score screen wasn't exactly standard. There were 9 numbers, Roman numerals. Next to the numbers, there were names, but no scores. 1. Mickey Mouth. 2. The Condor. 3. Allison Cat. 4. Radio Knife. 5. Carbon Thing. 6. Californiac. 7. Nova Trail. There's a dash after 8, and 9 is blank.
And that is the circle.
So these are the names of the players who won each of the games?
Yes.
But no Hazel.
No.
You've heard of the deep web?
Yeah.
The dark net?
I've downloaded my share of Tor browsers. Probably more than my share, actually.
Have you heard of the subnet?
No.
Mariana's Web?
That's a myth.
Well, yes and no.
What do you mean?
I mean, yes, there's currently no such thing as a secret place deeper than the deep web that's accessible only by quantum computers.
Computers that don't exist yet.
Well, let's put a pin in that.
The whole concept of quantum computers, especially in the way it's presented in this podcast, is really cool. I kind of think that's just kind of cool. The possibilities with quantum type computers, I think, would be kind of cool.
Okay.
Mariana's web isn't on the internet as you know it. It's on a hidden, exclusive intranet.
So, it's small.
Yes, very exclusive and very secure. Their encryption makes Bitcoin security coding look like the Milwaukee Public Library.
Okay, so what does all of this mean to me?
Go here. Find out.
Okay, but don't I have to physically access an intranet?
There is something between an intranet and an extranet, a system that incorporates a series of wireless transmitters, a complex relay setup. Lucky for you, Seattle is a hotspot.
And I think this is a good place to call this done. The magician's wisdom is something that is easy on the first time listen to just kind of breeze over, but on the second or third time you start to understand more of how this character was ingeniously written. It's very, very interesting. Very, very, very cool, but very interesting. So until next time, peace.